Uh, Good afternoon. Welcome to Amazing Excellence Academy. We are in chapter number 7 or unit number 7 of Agricultural Economics, where we are looking at the international trade policy and the agriculture. International trade policy and the agriculture. Welcome to the conversation and stay blessed. No countries are entirely self-sufficient in the supply of goods and services. You can understand that all of them are engaged in a trade, that is in the importation and exportation of some goods and services. This will allow international specialization. So much of international trade is arranged by the decision of individuals and firms and the state, particularly in the lower developed countries, which exert control over what is traded and upon what terms. All right. So most of international trade is arranged by the decisions of individuals, the firms, and the state, which exert control over what is traded and upon what terms should this what is being traded upon. Countries attach importance to the economics of trade. Okay. At the current time, there are major trade and economic issues on which the lower developed countries are highly critical of the policies of developed countries, and the others on which international banks and international bodies such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, are in turn critical of lower developed countries. The state interference is criticized, but is still widely practiced. Okay, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank reflect the dominant views emanating from Western industrial countries and from a large group of economists are generally in favor of free trade. They are generally opposed to measures which protect the lower developed countries, producers and consumers, and which reduce the trade. So the preference is to leave decisions about the resource allocation and the distribution of products to individual markets. So the idea is that, please, we want to leave the decisions about the resource allocation and the distribution of products to individual market forces, that is to the demand and supply. Arguments for free trade state that policy intervention in a market results in economic inefficiency and a static welfare loss to society. Okay, the argument for free trade states that policy intervention in a market results in economic inefficiency and a static welfare loss to the society. There is that argument, right? There is also the observation that many attempts by governments to control markets have proved to be misguided and excessively costly, even when there appear to be acceptable reasons for intervention. So it has been seen that many attempts by governments to control markets have shown to be misguided and excessively costly, even when there appear to be acceptable reasons for intervention. We can now give you, my colleagues, some on reading. Okay? Some on reading that I will give you is that you go out and consider the views of the structuralists and how these differ from the neoclassical views. So look at the difference between the neoclassical views and the structuralist views. Go and consider, that's your personal assignment. Go and try to consider, then yeah, it will pay. Shall we look at some of the instruments of intervention, right? Instrument of intervention. Some goods are produced in other countries as good complementing raw materials or factors of production. Now, therefore, a trade policy that aids or promotes the importation of such goods contributes to the development of the sector and vice versa, and helps enhance agricultural output. So the trade policy that aids or promotes the importation of such goods, which goods? The goods produced in other countries as good complementing raw materials or factors of production, right? Contributes to the development of the sector and vice versa, and it helps to enhance agricultural output. Other commodities such as imported final commodities compete with locally produced agricultural outputs. From microeconomics theory, this has the impact of dampening price for agricultural output, which contributes to slowed growth, all right? You can see that the impact of the same is that it dampens price for agricultural output, and this will contribute to the slowed growth. So the goods in this category have been cited as the major reasons for proponents of international trade policy, right? The argument is based on the theory of protection, in which supposedly infant local producers are protected from competing with usually technologically advanced and efficient foreign producers. So the local producers need to be, to be protected from that. The other thing that we observe now is the concept of export side policy. The export side policies, number one, the trade policy also excludes export side policies. Sorry, the trade policy also includes export side policies. It includes export side policies. These are policies that promote or they inhibit exports of goods and services. So the policies are there to promote or inhibit exports of goods and services. So the restrictions on exports are sometimes done to guarantee domestic availability of the commodity. So the idea behind restriction is sometimes to guarantee domestic availability of the commodity. Such policies, though detrimental to farming communities, they safeguard the availability of the good as important as maize on the local market. So the availability of the good as important as maize on the local market actually is safeguarded. It is safeguarded. Let's look at the types of instruments. The tariff barriers, right? The tariff barriers. With the tariff barriers, to trade are instruments that impose an extra cost on the good upon being imported or exported, as the case may be. So the tariff barriers to trade are instruments that impose an extra cost on the good upon being imported or exported, just as the case may be. So the tariffs are said to be fixed if imposed on the quantity of the goods. So they are fixed actually if they are imposed on the quantity of the good. Alternative, a tariff is called ad valorem. Ad valorem, which translates to according to value. This is derived or gotten from Latin, right? Ad valorem. This is a tariff that is based on the value of the good, right? The tariff is based on the value of the good. It is basically expressed not as a sum per unit of a good, but as a percentage of the value determined by the price. So the tax payable is directly proportional to the price of the good. So the tax that is payable is actually directly proportional to the price of the good. So the non-tariff barriers do not impose an extra cost. Instead, it acts directly on the quantity, right? It just acts directly on the quantity, doesn't impose some extra cost. So the non-tariff barriers may take the form of quotas, they take the form of voluntary agreements, they can take the form of restrictions on standards with emphasis on the health of consumers or the environment. So the non-tariff barriers may take the form of quotas, the voluntary agreements, or restrictions on standards, which places much emphasis on the health of consumers or the environment, sanitary, phytosanitary conditions, sanitary, phytosanitary conditions. The import tariffs. We will actually use the example of a commodity such as rice, in which there is excess domestic demand. Therefore, there is need to import the commodity, rice. So what are some of the assumptions now that we put, right? We assume that consumers only import when the asking price of the commodity is less than the domestic price. When the asking price of the commodity is less than the domestic price. And again, both the imported and the locally produced commodities are identical. Both the imported and locally produced commodity are identical. Small country case, the local market is too small to influence price on the international market. Those are some of the assumptions that we make. Okay. So we can see that autarky situation, the market will be in equilibrium at price pista, all right? This price. The market is in equilibrium, okay? The market is in equilibrium at this price. Then what will happen is that the quantity to equilibrium will be Q star, like that, okay? We assume now that the commodity can be imported at a landing price of PW. We want to import at a price that is lower at PW. Look at PW. PW is where it's lower of supply and demand. PW is smaller here. It's the price that is low. Observe now QD, QS, that the quantity supplied is actually lower than the quantity demanded at that low. So there is some shortage here. Observe what happens. So the consumer surplus will increase by the area, okay, by some area. What area is that, right? What area is that? By area A, B, and C. So the consumer surplus basically increase. And this shows that the commodity has become cheaper and the quantity demanded increases to QD at that time, from Q star to QD. So you see an increase in the quantity demand because the price has reduced, the consumer surplus increasing. The fall in price means lost income for farmers. Okay, the fall in price means lost income for farmers. So farmers have lost the income. So quantity supplied reduces from Q star to QS. These guys have lost income. So what they decide to do now is just basically just reduce supply. So they are reducing supply this time from Q star to QS. Why should they reduce supply? Because they have lost the income. So the deficit is usually covered by imports. Now that they have reduced supply to QS, then you will find that the quantity that is demanded is QD, there is also that shortage. This shortage or the deficit is what will be covered by import. So the size of import shall be QD minus QS. All that shall be the import. So in this scenario, that will subsist with free trade. According to economics theory, it leads to the highest society welfare and any deviation that causes some dead. Okay. All right. Now, since farmers are worse off in a free trade scenario, they will lob the government for protection. Farmers have been affected. The prices outside are really low, and the people are just importing, they're going outside. So the farmers say, no, government, please, we need your intervention. So on the basis of being an infant industry or still in early stages of development, the foreign producers are creating stiff competition, right? They'll say, we are infant industry and we are still in early stages of development. Please, government, intervene. And again, they'll say, the foreign producers are creating stiff competition for us. Please, government, intervene. The farmers will say, the long-term effect is that, okay, from this, the long-term effect is that if the loss to farmers' income is not mitigated, it may hamper investment in the sector. So they say, if you do not come in the long run, we will stop investing in this sector. Okay, they threaten food security. Farmers threaten food security. The government may want now to promote local production in order to be self-sufficient and have secure source of staple crops. So it may also be due to political reasons. So out of all these, you find that now the government comes in to intervene. Let's see now what happens with the import tariff. With the import tariff. In addition to the world price of PW, AA, tariff of tea is imposed such that new price for imported rice will be PW. This is now the new price for the imported good, PW plus T, right? A little bit higher than the world price. Now, this will lead to an increase in demand of the local product, which will push the price up, world price plus the tariff. When we impose a tariff, the people will be like, okay, we can now not go outside and import some things, or they reduce in whatever they go and buy from outside. Therefore, they will start demanding more of the local products or the local produce. When they demand more of the local produce, you will see that now the price will be just pushed up due to demand that has increased. Okay, you pay world price times tax, PW plus tax. This will increase price benefits. Increase in price benefits, it actually benefits the producers. So this increase will benefit the producers. Okay. The increase in local production will be the same thing. However, there is a reduction in the consumption of the commodity. The good is now more expensive, and so less is consumed. Understand? So the consumption levels reduced now again. What is demanded also reduced to QDD, right? QDD. So why should it reduce? Because the commodity has really become expensive this time around, and we can't just manage it. So some people can't manage. So it is that difficult and that challenging. So this is said to promote long-term growth. So the protection of infant farmers is there so that they can grow and become as efficient as the foreign counterparts. All right. So the idea is to make them as efficient as the foreign counterparts. Now, the consumers are made worse off. There is an increase. The consumers are made of worse off because of an increase in price A, B, C, and the reduced consumption D. So you see that the price has increased by that. Okay, A, B, C, and again, consumption has reduced. by D, right? By D, consumption is reduced. Then area C is the value of the tariff revenue. This is the value of the tariff revenue. So the width of the area is the quantity imported, while the height represents the tariff or revenue to government, the unit of the commodity. So this width is representing the quantity that is imported, which is the QDD minus QSS. This is the quantity that has been imported. It is that quantity which has imported. However, the height will represent the tariff itself. That will be the tariff, or rather the revenue to government per unit of the commodity that they want to purchase. So we want to know the total revenue that comes as a result of tariff. Usually you multiply the quantity times that tariff for the price. However, this area represents a gain by the government through increased tax revenue. B plus D are net loss to society or the economy as a whole, and refer to the dead weight. The dead weight loss, B and D. Now this has credited. This creates, so the loss of losers outweigh the gain by the gainers. The losers lose more than those that gain. This creates different views on the effect of such policies, right? Effect of such policies. Let's look at the export quotas now. The export quotas. If a commodity is cheaper in the country compared to the destination market, even with the transportation cost, with no restriction on export, traders will keep exporting until the price equalizes in both domestic and foreign market. However, this gives the farmers expanded markets for the produce. This gives farmers expanded market for the produce, right? Now, how are consumers hurt by the free trade? The idea is now to study, are the consumers hurt by the free trade? If yes, how? So the domestic production of maize is at QS, while demand falls below at QD, and the difference is exported. So QS is the domestic supply, right? And the demand is QD, really smaller than that. Okay. And the difference is exported. You export all that. So there is so much supply. So all trading is at the world determined price, PW. The world price is higher than the auto price. Okay. So to be effective, a quota ought to be below the equilibrium export quantity. You will set a quota that is below the equilibrium quantity. Assume now the government has determined the quota below the quantity being exported in the pre-intervention. The quota will specify the maximum that can be exported. Once that is reached, the remaining quantity must be exhausted on the domestic market. So the quota comes in, please, okay, you can export only to this level. And then the remaining should be absorbed by the domestic market level. This is what we just find here. The question that I give to you is that with an aid of diagrams, you need to explain the determination of price and the quantity when the quota is imposed. Use the diagrams to explain the determination of price and the quantity, especially when the quota is imposed. We will need you to clearly state with the aid of a diagram how the intervention affects different players in them. Show us with the diagrams how are the different players in the market affected by this intervention. Okay. Let's quickly look at the non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers. Some of these measures directly reduce the volume of trade. while others do so indirectly by causing adjustments in the domestic resource allocation, which in turn affect import demand or export supply. This may take the following forms. Number one, import quotas, voluntary agreements by exporting countries to observe quantitative restriction on their exports to key markets. An example that we can give of the multi-fiber agreement, under which many lower developed countries have accepted limits on their textile exports to developed countries. Number three, the health restriction which ban imports of livestock and crop products on the ground that disease may be spread. The fourth one is the use of import license to control the foreign exchange costs and the balance of payments. Number five, subsidies are there to protect domestic producers against foreign competition. Subsidies are there to protect, there will be subsidies to protect domestic producers against foreign competition. Number six, the domestic consumption or production taxes. Multiple exchange rate is the seventh one, the last one. These are some of the non-tariff barriers, okay, to free trade. There is an import quota now. The domestic supply and the demand curves are as shown as SD and the D respectively. Now, the supply from the rest of the world is assumed to be perfectly elastic at world price PW. Hence, the import supply curve SW is drawn horizontally because the supply from the rest of the world is assumed to be perfectly elastic. With competitive markets, in the absence of trade barriers, domestic supply would settle at Q and the demand at C. Now, the import would be C minus C, Q. That will be how much that will be imported around that time. Now, import quota, Q. The new with the quota supply curve is SD plus Q. That's a new supply curve that is formed adding quota to the domestic supplier at all prices above the world price, PW. At all prices above world price, total supply will equal that from domestic sources plus the import quota. At all prices above the world price, the total supply will equal that from domestic sources plus the import quota. This supply curve cuts the demand curve at C, the small c. We can see it is cutting the demand curve at C here. Left of the free trade equilibrium resulting in a higher domestic price, PQ. There's higher domestic price now, PQ. At this price, consumption will be less than before at C star. Domestic supply will rise to Q star. See that now domestic supply has increased Q star, and imports will be cut from C star or to Q prime, equal to the amount of the quota. The difference here is equal to the amount of the quota. Equal to the amount of quota Q. So now, similar to import tariff, PQ minus PW will be said to be an equivalent tariff to the quota. This difference will be said to be the equivalent to the tariff to the quota Q. The effects of alternative trade policies. are that producers are, let's start from producer surplus. When there is a tariff, it increases. The export subsidy will increase it, import quota will increase it, and voluntary export restaurant increases producer surplus, all of them. Consumer surplus, it will fall throughout. The government revenue will increase by tariffs, by subsidy, export subsidies will fall, okay? Then by import quota, it will not change. Then by voluntary exports, it will not change again. The overall national welfare is ambiguous under tariffs. Export subsidy, it will fall under export subsidy, the overall national welfare. And again, under import quota, it is ambiguous. And under voluntary export restaurant, it will fall. So these are some of the effects of alternative trade policies. Now, the World Trade Organization, WTO, and the agreements on agriculture has been championing free trade in order to promote the efficient employment of resources and support buoyant growth. The promotion of free trade in agriculture is contained in the World Trade Organization Agreement of Agriculture of 1995. The treaty stands on 3 pillars, namely the market access, domestic support, and export subsidies. Export subsidies, domestic support, and market access. With the market access, under this pillar, the member countries commit to remove or reduce distortions to free trade in an agreement. They want to commit to remove or reduce the distortions to free trade in the market. The member countries commit to tariffication, a process of converting all non-tariff barriers into simple tariffs. There is commitment to bound tariffs by setting an upper limit. There is a commitment to bound tariffs by setting an upper limit. Domestic support is one of the pillars again. Under domestic support, the agreement on which treaty calls on member states to reduce domestic support to agriculture, especially support that has the potential to distort the terms of trade. So the agreement on agriculture treaty calls on member states to reduce domestic support to the agriculture sector, especially support that has potential to distort the terms of trade. For example, one country subsidies production or input while another does not. When one country subsidizes production or input while another does not. Export subsidies. If some countries have reasons to subsidize exportation of agricultural products, other countries may find a justification to just impose countermeasures on imports. They can find justification to impose countermeasures on imports. That is if some countries have resources to subsidize exportation of agricultural products. The treaty therefore calls on member states to reduce both the value and the volume of export subsidies. The simple discussion we would give to you, students, is that as you are trying to consider the non-tariff barriers, what impact do you think these have on developing countries? Consider the non-tariff barriers and what impact do you think they have on developing countries, sanitary and phytosanitary. Discuss. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, thank you very much for having been a good class. God bless.